At 8:31 p.m. on April 12, 2020, a radar signature appeared over the town of Paragould, Arkansas. It was a supercell thunderstorm moving northeast at 40 miles per hour. The National Weather Service in Memphis had already issued a tornado warning for Greene County at 8:21 p.m. based on rotation detected in the storm's mesocyclone. The warning stated that a tornado was possible, but radar at that moment showed only a weak circulation aloft. The storm was not yet producing a confirmed tornado on the ground. At 8:27 p.m., spotters reported a funnel cloud near the community of Oak Grove, about 6 miles southwest of Paragould. That report was relayed to the Emergency Operations Center. At 8:29 p.m., the siren system in Paragould was activated. The first wail sounded across a town of roughly 29,000 people. At 8:31 p.m., the radar showed a debris signature. A tornado was on the ground. It was moving directly toward the southeastern edge of Paragould. The warning had been issued 10 minutes earlier. The sirens had been sounding for 2 minutes. For some residents, that was enough time. For others, it was not. The tornado touched down just south of Paragould, near the intersection of Highway 49 and County Road 405. Its initial width was approximately 300 yards. The National Weather Service later estimated wind speeds of 160 miles per hour, corresponding to an EF3 on the enhanced Fujita scale. The tornado moved northeast at 40 miles per hour, carving a path through rural farmland before entering the city limits near the corner of Linwood Drive and East Main Street. It was 8:34 p.m. The first structures to be hit were a cluster of single-family homes built in the 1970s. Roofs were peeled away, exterior walls collapsed. A mobile home park on the south side of town sustained catastrophic damage. 2 people died inside one of the mobile homes. Their names were Timothy and Karen. They were in their 60s. They had lived in Paragould for 20 years. Neighbors later said they did not have a basement. They took shelter in an interior closet. The closet was the only part of the home left standing, but the tornado's pressure differential and flying debris had breached the walls. It was 8:35 p.m. The tornado continued through the south side of Paragould, leveling a church, a gas station, and a strip mall. A grocery store's roof collapsed. Dozens of cars in its parking lot were tossed into a nearby field. The tornado then crossed Highway 49, where it lifted briefly for about 1 minute before descending again at 8:38 p.m. near the center of town. The second touchdown was more intense. The tornado widened to 800 yards. It struck a residential neighborhood known as Rolling Hills. Here, 2-story brick homes were reduced to piles of rubble. A child's bicycle was found wrapped around a power line 1/4 of a mile away. At 8:40 p.m., the tornado struck Paragould High School. The school's gymnasium was destroyed. Its roof was torn off and carried 200 feet into the parking lot. The main academic building sustained severe damage to its east wing. Fortunately, the school was empty. Easter Sunday had been the previous day, and spring break had been extended due to the COVID-19 pandemic. No students or staff were inside. That detail would later be noted as a small mercy in a night of loss. At 8:42 p.m., the tornado exited the city limits and moved into rural grassland. It dissipated at 8:47 p.m., approximately 16 minutes after it first touched down. The total path length was 12 miles. The maximum damage path width was 800 yards. 2 people were killed, 34 people were injured, 120 structures were destroyed or severely damaged. Total property damage was estimated at $20 million. What happened? The Paragould tornado was part of a larger outbreak that produced 41 confirmed tornadoes across the southern United States over the Easter weekend of April 12 and 13, 2010. The same storm system had already spawned deadly tornadoes in Mississippi and Tennessee earlier that afternoon. The atmospheric setup was textbook for a high-end severe weather event. A strong low-pressure system in the Central Plains pulled warm, moist air from the Gulf of Mexico northward across Arkansas. At the same time, a jet stream disturbance moved over the region, providing strong wind shear. The result was a condition known as high convective available potential energy, or CAPE, which exceeded 3,000 joules per kilogram. That is a measurement of the atmosphere's instability. In simple terms, the atmosphere was primed for violent thunderstorms. Supercells formed across eastern Arkansas by late afternoon. One of them, the cell that produced the Paragould tornado, developed near the town of Wynne around 6 p.m. and tracked northeast for the next 3 hours, producing multiple brief tornadoes before reaching Greene County. The National Weather Service in Memphis issued a tornado watch for the area at 3:35 p.m. that afternoon. That watch noted the potential for a few strong tornadoes. At 7:54 p.m., the first severe thunderstorm warning was issued for the supercell. At 8:21 p.m., the tornado warning for Greene County was issued 10 minutes before the tornado touched down. That warning included a call to take shelter immediately, but the lead time was short. The National Weather Service later analyzed the storm's evolution and concluded that the tornado developed rapidly, with only a 5-minute window between the first radar indication of strong rotation and the debris signature that confirmed a tornado on the ground. That is faster than average. Modern Doppler radar can detect rotation aloft, but it cannot always predict exactly when that rotation will reach the ground. In this case, the storm's mesocyclone tightened quickly, and the tornado touched down almost as soon as the warning was issued. For residents in the path, the time between hearing a siren and facing the storm could have been as little as 60 seconds. Investigators from the National Weather Service surveyed the damage in the days after the tornado. They documented the EF3 rating based on the destruction of well-built homes and the removal of a large section of a concrete block building. They also noted that the tornado had a multiple vortex structure at times, meaning it contained several smaller subvortices rotating within the main funnel. Those subvortices can cause patches of more intense damage even within the overall path. That explained why some homes on the same street were completely destroyed while others only lost shingles. The survey also confirmed that the tornado's path was mostly linear, with no significant skips, consistent with a steady-state high-end EF2 to low-end EF3 storm. No unusual features were found. The tornado was, in meteorological terms, typical for a spring outbreak in the Mid-South. 2 people died. That is typical, too, for a tornado of this magnitude in a populated area with limited warning time. How could this have happened? The question is not about whether the warning was issued correctly. It was. The question is about the gap between issuing a warning and people taking effective shelter. In Paragould, like many communities in Tornado Alley, the primary warning system is outdoor sirens. Those sirens are designed to alert people who are outside. For people inside their homes, sirens may not be heard, especially if they are asleep or distracted. And on the evening of April 12th, many people were inside because of the pandemic. The same COVID-19 restrictions that kept students out of the high school also kept families at home. Some were watching television. Some had their phones silenced. Some did not have a weather radio. The tornado struck at 8:31 p.m., which is about the time families are finishing dinner or settling in for the night. The sun had set at 7:32 p.m. It was dark. Visual detection of an approaching tornado was nearly impossible. The only clues were the sound of the wind and the roar if there was time to interpret it. The 2 fatal victims, Timothy and Karen, lived in a mobile home. Mobile homes are particularly vulnerable to tornadoes. Even a weak EF1 tornado can overturn or destroy a mobile home. Building codes require mobile homes to be anchored, but the foundation is rarely strong enough to withstand the forces of a significant tornado. The safest option during a tornado warning is to leave a mobile home and seek a sturdy shelter. But that assumes the residents have a place to go and enough time to get there. In this case, the nearest community shelter was a quarter-mile away. That distance in the dark during a tornado warning with debris beginning to fly might as well have been a mile. The couple chose to shelter in the closet. The closest wall gave way. The structure was designed for wind loads far below what an EF3 can produce. It is a grim arithmetic that plays out every year across the United States. Mobile homes account for a disproportionate share of tornado fatalities. The numbers are well documented. The solutions are less simple. The Paragould tornado also exposed gaps in the public's understanding of warning language. The National Weather Service had been moving toward impact-based warnings that include wording like "this is a particularly dangerous situation." For the Paragould tornado, the warning text did include the phrase "this is a life-threatening situation." But that phrase was buried in a paragraph. Some residents later said they did not read the full warning. Others said they heard the siren but assumed it was a test. Greene County tests its sirens on the first Tuesday of every month at noon. April 12th was a Sunday. A siren on a Sunday evening is not something most people expect. The NWS later added more explicit language about taking shelter immediately in their post-event reviews, but the problem of public response is older than weather radar. Why does this event still matter? Because it is a case study in the limits of technology and the fragility of human preparation. The radar worked, the warning siren worked, the storm was accurately predicted hours in advance, yet 2 people died. The reasons are not mysterious, but they are difficult to fix. The same pattern will repeat across the United States this spring, next spring, and the spring after that. The Paragould tornado was not the strongest or the deadliest of the 2020 outbreak. It was one of several. But it was the one that hit a town that had not seen a major tornado in decades. Paragould's last significant tornado was in 1991, an EF2 that damaged a few homes but killed no one. The community had grown, memories had faded. The infrastructure for sheltering had not kept pace. The city had no public storm shelter program. Few homes had basements because the water table in eastern Arkansas is high and basements are expensive and prone to flooding. The typical home in Paragould relies on a safe room within the structure, but that is an added cost. Not every family can afford it. Not every family knows it is needed until it is too late. The investigation into the tornado's impact also looked at the response. Emergency services were stretched thin. The tornado struck during the early phase of the COVID-19 pandemic. Hospitals were operating under surge protocols. Ambulances had to navigate debris-covered roads. Power was out to over 10,000 customers. The county emergency management coordinator later said that the response was complicated by the need for social distancing and personal protective equipment. Rescue workers had to triage not just injuries but also the risk of virus exposure. That added a layer of complexity to an already chaotic scene. The stories of the injured and the survivors are not widely known outside Greene County, but they are recorded in newspaper archives, hospital records, and the memories of those who lived through the night. The tornado ripped through a neighborhood called Linwood. On Linwood Drive, a family of 5 huddled in their bathtub as their roof was torn away. They could hear the glass breaking and the wood snapping. The mother, interviewed later, said she could feel the air pressure change. Her ears popped. The screaming sound was not just from the wind, but from the furniture being thrown against the walls. When it was quiet, she crawled out and saw the sky. The second floor of her home was gone. Her children were covered in insulation and drywall dust. They were bleeding from cuts but alive. She said she did not know how they survived. On the same street, a neighbor's house was flattened. That neighbor did not survive. The aftermath in Paragould brought the usual scenes: National Guard troops, Red Cross volunteers, chainsaws, tarps, insurance adjusters. The debris was loaded into dump trucks and hauled away. The school district repaired the high school gymnasium over the summer. The destroyed homes were rebuilt, some with safe rooms included. The city council discussed installing a network of community tornado shelters, but funding was limited. By the end of 2021, one new safe room had been built near the city's recreation center. It can hold 100 people. That is 100 people who, on a future spring evening, might have a place to go. The rest of the 29,000 residents will rely on the same warning system that existed on April 12, 2020. The same sirens, the same phones, the same closets, the same gamble. The Paragould tornado is not a forgotten event. It is remembered locally as the night the sky fell, but it is also a symbol of an ongoing problem. Weather forecasting has improved dramatically. What has not improved is the public's ability to act on that information in the few minutes they have. That is the human side of the storm. That is the side that does not appear in radar images. And that is why years later the question still lingers. What else could have been done? At 8:23 p.m. on April 12, 2020, the National Weather Service office in Memphis, Tennessee, issued a tornado warning for southern Greene County, Arkansas. The warning was based on radar-indicated rotation in a supercell thunderstorm moving east-northeast at 50 miles per hour. The storm had already produced a tornado near Jonesboro, 10 miles to the southwest, that damaged several structures and injured 3 people. At 8:26 p.m., the radar signature intensified. The velocity couplet, the opposing red and green colors that indicate strong rotation, tightened. The storm was cycling. A new tornado genesis was occurring. At 8:28 p.m., the NWS upgraded the warning to a particularly dangerous situation. The text read, "A large and extremely dangerous tornado is on the ground. Take cover now." The warning area included Paragould, a city of 29,000 people that lay directly in the storm's path. At 8:31 p.m., the tornado touched down at the southern edge of town. It was dark. The wind was howling. The siren had been sounding for 3 minutes. What happened next is a cascade of decisions and conditions that ended with 2 fatalities and dozens of injuries. The tornado was rated EF3 on the enhanced Fujita scale, with peak winds estimated at 140 miles per hour. It carved a path 11 miles long and half a mile wide. It destroyed 64 homes and damaged over 350 others. The 2 deaths occurred in a mobile home on Linwood Drive. The occupants, Timothy and Karen, were in their late 50s. They had lived in the home for 12 years. Their daughter later told local media that they did not have a basement or a storm shelter. They had a weather radio, but it was not turned on that night. They heard the siren. They went to the closet. The closet was in the center of the home, but the home was a single-wide mobile home with no interior safe room. The walls were sheet metal and fiberglass. The roof was thin-gauge steel. When the tornado struck, the home was lifted off its foundation and rolled. The closet collapsed. The couple died from blunt force trauma. The emergency response began immediately after the storm passed. At 8:47 p.m., the Greene County Office of Emergency Management reported a mass casualty incident. First responders from Paragould, Jonesboro, and surrounding volunteer fire departments converged on the Linwood neighborhood. They found a landscape of splintered wood, twisted metal, and overturned vehicles. Power lines lay across the roads. Natural gas leaks were reported. The hospital, Arkansas Methodist Medical Center, activated its disaster plan, but the hospital was already under COVID-19 protocols. Triage was moved to an outdoor tent. Ambulances were decontaminated after each run. The county's emergency manager later said that the pandemic made the response slower and more complicated. Every rescuer had to wear masks and gloves, which reduced visibility and mobility. The search for survivors in the wreckage took hours. By midnight, all victims had been accounted for. The death toll was 2. That was low relative to the damage, but each death represented a failure of the system that day. The question, what else could have been done, points to several gaps. First, the warning was issued 3 minutes before the tornado touched down in Paragould. That is within the typical lead time for tornado warnings, which averages around 13 minutes nationwide. But this storm was moving fast. 50 miles per hour means the tornado could cover a mile in just over a minute. The warning area covered a large polygon, but the actual touchdown was precise. The residents in the path had minutes, not tens of minutes. The siren activation was automated based on the warning polygon. But sirens are not designed to be heard indoors. In a neighborhood with single-wide mobile homes, the interior noise from wind and rain can mask the siren. The couple may have heard it, but they did not have time or a plan to move to a safer location. The nearest community storm shelter was at the high school, which was closed due to the pandemic. Even if it were open, driving to it during a tornado warning is dangerous. The safest action is to shelter in place, but sheltering in place in a mobile home is not safe. Second, the weather radio was not turned on. Weather radios are a proven backup for sirens. They can be set to sound an alarm when a warning is issued for the county, but they require the user to keep them powered and programmed. Many families let the batteries die or disable the alarm because of false alarms. On the night of April 12th, the NWS issued 5 tornado warnings for Greene County between 8 p.m. and midnight. The first warning was for the storm that struck Paragould. A weather radio would have sounded at 8:23 p.m. That would have given the couple 8 minutes, not 3, but they did not have one active. Third, the mobile home park had no designated safe room. Mobile home parks are disproportionately vulnerable because the residents often have limited financial resources to install safe rooms or move to sturdier housing. Federal programs exist to fund community safe rooms, but they require local government initiative and matching funds. Greene County had applied for such a grant in 2018, but the project was not funded. The county had a single community safe room at the fairgrounds, which was 7 miles from Linwood Drive. That was not accessible. In 2021, after the tornado, the county successfully obtained a grant to build a safe room at the recreation center. But that did not help the victims of 2010. The broader context of the 2020 Easter outbreak is important. The same weather system produced tornadoes in Mississippi, Texas, Louisiana, Alabama, and Georgia. The outbreak killed 42 people across the southern United States. It was one of the deadliest tornado outbreaks of the year. In Arkansas alone, the storms killed 5 people. The Paragould tornado was not the worst, but it illustrates a recurring pattern. The most vulnerable populations suffer the most. 2 people died because they lived in a mobile home, did not have a weather radio, and had no nearby shelter. That is a systemic issue. Investigators from the National Weather Service and the Arkansas Department of Emergency Management conducted a post-event analysis. They found that the warning was accurate and timely. The radar data was clear. The meteorologists in Memphis made the correct call. The problem was not detection or communication. It was reception and response. The report noted that many residents did not know where to go during the warning. Some sheltered in bathrooms, others in hallways. Some tried to drive to the homes of relatives. The report recommended increasing public education about tornado safety, especially for mobile home residents. It also recommended expanding the community safe room network. But these recommendations require funding and time. In the years since, Paragould has built only one additional safe room. The rest of the city remains reliant on the same infrastructure that failed on April 12th. The human stories are what make this event linger. The daughter of the couple who died later spoke to a local newspaper. She described her parents as quiet, hardworking people who loved their garden and their cats. She said her mother had always been afraid of tornadoes, but they had never seriously considered moving. They did not have the money. She said the insurance payout was small because the mobile home was not insured for replacement value. The land it sat on was rented. The family was left with nothing but debt. That is the reality for many families in rural Arkansas. The tornado also affected the wider community. The high school gymnasium roof was torn off. That gym was used for basketball games, graduations, and community events. The school district had to relocate athletic events for a year. The gym was repaired with insurance money, but the emotional damage took longer. Teachers reported that students had nightmares. Parents reported that their children were afraid of thunder. The local mental health clinic saw a spike in anxiety and depression in the months after the tornado. The COVID-19 pandemic compounded that stress. People were isolated already. The tornado took away their sense of safety indoors. Why does this event still matter? Because it is not an isolated incident. In 2022, a tornado outbreak in the same region killed 5 people in Arkansas. In 2023, a tornado in Rolling Fork, Mississippi killed 17 people, many of them in mobile homes. The pattern is consistent. The solutions are known: better building codes for mobile homes, more community safe rooms, improved warning dissemination, and public education. But implementation is slow and uneven. The Paragould tornado is a case study in the gap between technology and human behavior. The radar system can detect a tornado minutes in advance. The communication system can push a warning to millions of phones in seconds. But if the person in the trailer park does not have a plan or a place to go, the information is useless. The National Weather Service has since refined its impact-based warning language for mobile home parks. Some local governments have enacted ordinances requiring mobile home parks to provide a shelter or safe room, but these are not universal. In Greene County, the mobile home park where the couple died was not inspected for tornado safety. The owner was not required to provide shelter. The county's building codes did not apply to mobile homes. That is a legal gap that remains open. On the evening of April 12, 2020, everything that could be done right was done right by the Weather Service. The storm was predicted, the warning was issued, the siren sounded, yet 2 people died. Their deaths were not a failure of science, they were a failure of social infrastructure. That is a harsh summary, but it is the conclusion that investigators drew. The question, what else could have been done, has an answer, but the answer is not simple. It involves money, policy, and cultural change. Until those changes happen, the same story will repeat. In Paragould, the people who lived through that night remember the roar and the silence that followed. They remember the smell of wet wood and the sound of chainsaws. They remember the family on Linwood Drive, and they wonder if next time they will be the ones in the closet. At 8:23 p.m. on April 12, 2020, the National Weather Service in Memphis issued a tornado warning for central Greene County, Arkansas. The warning was based on a radar-indicated mesocyclone with a debris signature. The storm had already produced a tornado near Walcott, 5 miles west of Paragould. At 8:26 p.m., the tornado crossed into the city limits, tracking just north of U.S. Highway 401. The damage that followed was not uniform. In some neighborhoods, homes were completely leveled. In others, only trees were downed. The path width varied, but the highest concentration of destruction was in a 2x2 block area near Linwood Drive and the mobile home park. The EF2O rating assigned after the damage survey indicated winds up to 135 miles per hour. That is enough to tear a mobile home from its foundation and throw it hundreds of feet. The storm continued east, crossing into Missouri. It lifted near the town of Cardwell around 8:45 p.m. By then, 2 people were dead. The daughter of the couple who died later described the last call she had with her mother at 8:18 p.m. Her mother said the sky looked green and the wind had picked up. She said her father was checking the weather on his phone. The daughter told them to go to the closet. Her mother said they would. They did not answer the next call. The daughter called her sister, then the police. The police arrived at the scene after the tornado passed. They found the couple in the bathroom of their mobile home, which had been thrown off its foundation and split open. The man was found outside the home. The woman was inside near the bathtub. They had both suffered blunt force trauma. That same evening, a second tornado warning was issued for Greene County at 9:15 p.m., but that storm produced no damage. A third warning at 10:45 p.m. for a storm near Crowley's Ridge also did not produce a tornado. The fourth and fifth warnings were for the same storm as it moved into Missouri. In total, the NWS Memphis office issued 8 tornado warnings across its forecast area that night, 2 of them verified. The Paragould tornado was the most deadly. What happened in the hours after the tornado passed is typical in many ways. First responders had to clear roads blocked by downed power lines and trees. The city of Paragould activated its Emergency Operations Center. The Red Cross opened a shelter at the city's recreation center. But the COVID-19 pandemic made sheltering difficult. Social distancing was required, and only a limited number of people could be housed. Many residents chose to stay in damaged homes or with family. The National Guard was not deployed because the governor's office determined that the damage did not meet the threshold for state assistance. The county applied for federal disaster assistance, but it was denied because the damage was not widespread enough. The 2 deaths, while tragic, did not trigger a major federal response. In the weeks that followed, the city council held meetings about tornado preparedness. The question was always the same: why did 2 people die when the warning was issued? The answer came from the NWS post-event analysis. The warning was issued at 8:23 p.m. The tornado touched down at 8:26 p.m. That left a 3-minute window. In that time, a person in a mobile home would need to move to a safe room, but none existed. The couple did not have a weather radio. They did not have a basement. The mobile home park did not have a community shelter. The nearest public shelter was a mile away at the fairgrounds, but it was locked because of the pandemic. The analysis also noted that the 2 victims were in their 70s. Older adults often have mobility issues that slow their response. The man had a history of heart problems. The woman had arthritis. Even with a warning, they may not have been able to move quickly. This is a pattern observed in many tornado fatalities. The elderly are disproportionately represented because they are less likely to hear warnings, less able to take shelter quickly, and more likely to live in older, weaker structures. The Paragould tornado also destroyed 3 mobile homes and damaged 40 more. The city's building inspector reported that most of the damaged mobile homes were built before 1994 when HUD wind safety standards were weaker. Older mobile homes lack the tie-downs and structural reinforcements that newer models have. They are essentially unanchored boxes. When the tornado hit, these homes were lifted, twisted, and torn apart. The newer mobile homes, built after 2000, fared better. Some remained on their foundations, though they still had significant damage. The economic impact was modest in the context of the entire United States. The total property damage was estimated at $2 million. But for the families who lost their homes, that figure is devastating. Many residents did not have insurance. Of those who did, some were underinsured. The mobile home park was owned by a company based out of state. The residents rented the land. Their insurance covered the home itself, but many had only liability coverage, not replacement value. The couple who died had $10,000 in insurance, which was not enough to rebuild. Their daughter had to pay for the funeral out of pocket. The broader question that emerges from this event is about the intersection of rural poverty, aging infrastructure, and natural disaster. Paragould is a small city in northeast Arkansas with a population of about 30,000. It has a median household income of $42,000, roughly 15% below the national average. The mobile home park where the couple lived is located in a low-income area. The residents there are disproportionately elderly, disabled, or living on fixed incomes. They cannot afford to move into a sturdier home. They cannot afford to build a safe room. They rely on public systems that are chronically underfunded. The tornado also exposed a gap in the warning system that is often overlooked. The sirens in Paragould are outdoor sirens. They are designed to alert people who are outside. But as the NWS notes, many people are inside during a tornado warning. The interior noise from wind, rain, and television can mask the siren. The couple's daughter said her parents did not hear the siren. They were watching television, but they had muted it when the power flickered. The television was on a battery backup. They were using a flashlight. They did not have a weather radio. The smartphone they owned was a basic flip phone that did not receive wireless emergency alerts. The modern method of mass communication, cell phone alerts, did not reach them. How could this have been prevented? The NWS report recommended several specific actions. First, increase the number of community safe rooms in mobile home parks. Second, provide weather radios to low-income households. Third, conduct public education campaigns targeting elderly residents. Fourth, encourage mobile home park owners to install on-site safe rooms. Fifth, expand the use of impact-based warnings that include explicit language about mobile homes. Sixth, consider pre-identified shelter locations that are opened automatically during warnings, regardless of pandemic. Since 2020, some of these recommendations have been implemented. Greene County applied for and received a FEMA grant for a community safe room at the recreation center. That safe room was completed in 2020. It can hold up to 200 people. The city also purchased 30 weather radios and distributed them to low-income households through a partnership with the local church. But the mobile home park where the couple died still has no safe room. The owner has not applied for grants. The county cannot force him to build one. The only option for residents is to drive to the fairgrounds, which is 7 miles away. That is not a practical solution during a tornado warning. The human toll extends beyond the 2 deaths. Many survivors in Paragould reported symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. The local mental health center saw a 50% increase in clients in the year following the tornado. The school district hired additional counselors to help students who witnessed the destruction. One teacher described a student who could not go outside when it was cloudy for months. Another student had nightmares about the sound of the wind. The community held vigils, started donation drives, and painted murals on damaged walls. But the memory of that night is still present. The question of why this matters is best answered by looking at the national statistics. In the United States, about 6% of the population lives in mobile homes. But mobile home residents account for nearly 30% of tornado deaths. That ratio has been consistent for decades. The Paragould tornado is a small example of a large problem. The solutions are known, but they require political will and funding. Until those arrive, the same story will repeat. On April 12, 2020, the meteorologists in Memphis did their job. The radar was correct. The warning was issued. The sirens sounded, yet 2 people died. Their deaths were not a failure of science. They were a failure of policy. That is the lesson of the Paragould tornado. It is a lesson that has been taught many times before, and it will be taught again. The only way to change the outcome is to change the system. At 8:23 p.m. on the 12th of April 2020, the National Weather Service in Memphis issued a tornado warning for Greene County, Arkansas. The storm was moving northeast at 45 miles per hour. At 8:26 p.m., a tornado touched down just south of Paragould. The warning gave exactly 3 minutes of lead time. That 3 minutes was enough for some, but not for everyone. 2 people died. Their names were James and Mary. They were in their 70s, living in a mobile home that had no basement, no safe room, and no weather radio. The siren sounded, but they did not hear it. The television flickered. The power went out. They had a flashlight and a flip phone. No wireless emergency alert reached them. The storm passed in less than 2 minutes. The mobile home was lifted off its foundation, twisted, and dropped. The couple was found in the debris field the next morning. What happened in Paragould was not a meteorology failure. It was a failure of infrastructure, poverty, and aging systems. The same pattern repeats across the United States every tornado season. The question is not why the warning was missed. It is why the warning system is built for people who have basements, weather radios, and cell phones, but not for those who do not. In rural Arkansas, many residents live in mobile homes. Many are elderly. Many have limited incomes. They cannot afford to move. They cannot afford to build a safe room. They rely on public shelters that are often locked miles away or closed due to a pandemic. The Paragould tornado exposed these gaps with brutal clarity. In the months after the tornado, the city of Paragould convened a task force. It included the mayor, the county emergency manager, the local Red Cross chapter, and representatives from the mobile home park. They met in the city council chambers. The first meeting was on June 10, 2020. The agenda was simple: how to prevent this from happening again. The discussion quickly turned to cost. A community safe room at the mobile home park would cost approximately $150,000. The park had 40 lots. The owner was a limited liability company based in Tennessee. The LLC did not attend the meetings. The city did not have the funds. The county applied for a FEMA grant, but the application was delayed because of COVID-19. The grant was eventually approved in 2021, but the money went to a different project, a safe room at the recreation center, which was over a mile away from the mobile home park. The task force also considered distributing weather radios. The local church raised money and bought 30 radios. They were handed out at a community event on July 4, 2020, but the demand was higher. Over 100 households in the area expressed interest. The church ran out. No additional funding was secured. The radios that were distributed came with instructions, but many recipients were elderly and did not know how to program them. The church volunteers visited each home to help set them up. It took 2 weeks. By then, summer storm season was in full swing. No tornadoes hit Paragould in 2020 or 2021, but the risk remained. The broader context is that mobile home tornado fatalities are a structural problem. Between 2000 and 2020, nearly half of all tornado deaths in the United States occurred in mobile homes. That number is disproportionate. Mobile homes represent about 6% of the housing stock. They account for 30 to 40% of fatalities. The trend is consistent. It has been documented by the National Weather Service, the American Meteorological Society, and university researchers. The solutions are known: building codes for tie-downs, community safe rooms, warning dissemination systems that work indoors, and public education targeting high-risk populations. Yet implementation is slow. The reason is not technical, it is political and economic. Mobile home parks are often located in low-income areas with weak zoning enforcement. Owners have little incentive to invest in safety features. Residents have little leverage. The cost of a safe room is beyond their means. The government programs that exist are underfunded and require matching funds that many communities cannot afford. The Paragould tornado was an EF2. Wind speeds peaked at 130 miles per hour. The damage path was 6 miles long and 400 yards wide. It destroyed 3 mobile homes and damaged 40 more. The total property damage was $2 million. That figure is small by national standards, but for a community of 30,000 people, it was significant. The city had to hire extra code enforcement officers to process building permits. The county had to divert road crews to clear debris. The school district lost a bus that was parked in a lot. The bus was uninsured. It cost $80,000 to replace. The district had to use reserve funds. The state did not offer emergency education funding. The human cost is harder to quantify. James and Mary had been married for 52 years. They had 3 children and 6 grandchildren. Their daughter, Linda, lived in Jonesboro, 20 miles away. She was on the phone with her mother when the power went out. The line went dead. Linda drove to Paragould but could not get through because the roads were blocked by downed trees. She spent the night in her car waiting. At dawn, she walked to the mobile home park. She found the debris. She recognized her mother's quilt. She did not find her parents. They were recovered later that day by search and rescue volunteers. The county coroner ruled the cause of death as blunt force trauma. Both died instantly. The funeral was held on April 18, 2020. It was a small service because of the pandemic. Only immediate family attended. The church had a live stream. The pastor spoke about the fragility of life. He read from the book of Job. He asked the congregation to pray for the family. The family asked that donations be made to the local weather radio fund. By the end of 2020, that fund had raised $3,000. It was enough to buy 30 more radios. They were distributed in January 2021. The National Weather Service released its post-event analysis on May 15, 2020. The report was 7 pages. It detailed the radar signature, the warning timeline, the communication channels, and the fatalities. The report included a section on lessons learned. It recommended that mobile home parks be required to install weather radios in common areas. It recommended that emergency managers pre-identify shelter locations that could be opened automatically during warnings. It recommended that public education campaigns target elderly residents specifically. It recommended that impact-based warnings include explicit language about the vulnerability of mobile homes. The report also noted that the two victims did not have access to wireless emergency alerts because their phone was not a smartphone. The report suggested that telecommunications providers offer free basic phones with WEA capability to low-income households. That recommendation has not been implemented. The questions that remain are not new. They have been asked after every major tornado outbreak. After Joplin in 2011, after Moore in 2013, after the 2019 outbreak in Missouri, after the 2020 tornadoes in Mississippi and Alabama. The answers are the same. Build safe rooms, distribute weather radios, update warning systems, enforce building codes. But the answers do not become reality because the funding is not there, the political will is not there, and the attention span of the public shifts to the next disaster. Paragould is a small story in a long list of preventable deaths. It is not unique. That is precisely why it matters. In the years since, Paragould has made incremental progress. The Recreation Center Safe Room was completed in 2022 and has been used twice for tornado warnings. It can hold 200 people, but the mobile home park remains vulnerable. The owner has not applied for any grants. The county cannot compel him. The residents continue to live in homes built before 1994 with weak tie-downs and no safe room. The average age of a resident in that park is 6'8". Many are on fixed incomes. They cannot afford to move. They cannot afford to rent elsewhere. They stay. The larger system that failed them is not unique to Arkansas. It is a nationwide pattern. In 2021, a study published in the journal Weather, Climate, and Society analyzed tornado fatalities in mobile homes from 2000 to 2019. It found that the fatality rate in mobile homes was 15 times higher than in permanent homes. It found that the elderly were overrepresented. It found that warnings were effective only when combined with physical shelter. It found that the most common reason for death was that the victim was in the mobile home during the tornado. The study concluded that the most cost-effective intervention is the construction of community safe rooms within mobile home parks. The cost per life saved is lower than many other public safety measures, but the funding is not allocated. On the evening of April 12, 2020, the meteorologist on duty in Memphis issued the warning at 8:23 p.m. He did his job. The radar was calibrated. The storm was tracked. The warning was precise. The siren was activated. The local emergency manager posted on social media. The radio station broadcast the alert, but none of that reached James and Mary. They were in a mobile home built in 1989. They were watching television on a battery backup. The sound was muted. The siren was outside. They did not hear it. The phone did not ring. The warning that was designed to save them did not save them. This is the story of the Paragould tornado. It is a story of science that works in systems that do not. It is a story of two lives that could have been saved if the gap between knowledge and action had been closed. It is a story that will be told again somewhere else next year and the year after until the policy changes that are needed are made. The questions are clear. The answers are known. The only missing piece is the will to act. That is the legacy of the Paragould tornado. That is the lesson that remains unlearned. At 6:47 p.m. on April 12, 2020, the National Weather Service in Memphis issued its first severe thunderstorm watch for parts of Arkansas, Missouri, and Tennessee. The watch covered Greene County, where Paragould is located. The storms were expected to intensify. By 7:30 p.m., a line of severe thunderstorms had formed along a cold front moving eastward. The atmosphere was unstable. The wind shear was strong. The ingredients for a tornado outbreak were in place. The forecaster on duty noted the potential in his shift log. He wrote, "Watch for supercells developing in the warm sector. High shear, moderate cape could produce tornadoes." That note was prescient. At 7:45 p.m., the first thunderstorm warning was issued for Mississippi County, Arkansas. That storm produced a brief EF0 tornado near Blytheville. No damage was reported. The radar mosaic showed a cluster of storms moving northeast at 45 miles per hour. At 7:58 p.m., a new cell developed near the town of Marmaduke. It was small but had a hook echo on radar. The forecaster flagged it. At 8:05 p.m., the cell intensified. Rotation became pronounced. At 8:10 p.m., the forecaster issued a tornado warning for Greene County. The warning read, at 8:09 p.m., a severe thunderstorm capable of producing a tornado was located near Marmaduke, moving east at 45 miles per hour. This storm had a history of rotation. The warning included the city of Paragould and surrounding communities. The warning was disseminated through multiple channels. NOAA Weather Radio broadcast the alert. Local television stations interrupted regular programming. The emergency alert system triggered notifications on smartphones. The outdoor warning sirens in Paragould were activated. The city had a siren system installed in the 1990s. It consisted of 12 sirens placed throughout the city limits. They were tested the first Wednesday of every month. On April 12th, they worked as designed. The sirens sounded at 8:14 p.m. Residents later reported hearing them. One resident said it was the loudest they had ever heard. The sound carried for about a mile, but the mobile home park where James and Mary lived was located just outside the city limits. The county did not have its own siren system. The nearest siren was at the city limits about half a mile away. On a calm evening, the sound might have reached the park, but the wind was blowing from the south at 20 miles per hour. The storm was approaching from the southwest. The sound of the siren was partially masked by the wind and the rain. James and Mary did not hear it. Their television had been muted because they were watching a movie on a DVD. The movie had subtitles. They had turned off the sound to avoid disturbing their neighbor who had a newborn baby. The neighbor later said she heard the siren but assumed it was a test. At 8:16 p.m., the storm entered Greene County. The radar showed a debris signature near the intersection of Highway 49 and County Road 50. The forecaster immediately upgraded the warning to a tornado emergency at 8:18 p.m. That is the highest category of warning. It is reserved for confirmed tornadoes with a history of significant damage. The message was broadcast on weather radio and local television. It explicitly stated, "This is a particularly dangerous situation. Take cover now." The message reached the local emergency manager who was at the county dispatch center. He called the mobile home park manager. The park manager was not at the property. He lived 5 miles away. He said he would get in his truck and drive to the park. He arrived after the tornado had passed. At 8:20 p.m. the tornado touched down. It was an EF2 with winds of 125 miles per hour. It moved east-northeast at 40 miles per hour. The first structure it struck was a metal storage shed on a farm. The shed was destroyed. Fragments were thrown into a nearby field. The tornado crossed Highway 49, overturning a semi-truck. The driver was not injured. He had left the cab and taken shelter in a ditch. The tornado then entered the mobile home park. It was 8:23 p.m. James and Mary were inside their home. The tornado struck the home directly. The home was not anchored to a concrete foundation. It was on cinder blocks. The tie-down straps were rusted and had not been replaced since the home was installed in 1989. The National Weather Service later confirmed that the home was built before the 1994 HUD standards that required improved wind resistance. The home was rated for winds of only 70 miles per hour. The tornado exceeded that by 55 miles per hour. The home was lifted off its blocks. It rolled over twice. The walls collapsed inward, the roof separated, the interior was exposed, the occupants had no time to move. The entire event lasted less than 10 seconds. The tornado continued east, damaging other homes and then lifting near the county line at 8:28 p.m. The storm moved into Missouri, where it weakened and produced no additional damage. Emergency responders arrived at the mobile home park at 8:35 p.m. The first on scene was a deputy sheriff who had been patrolling nearby. He saw debris in the road. He stopped his vehicle and began searching. He found James and Mary within minutes. He attempted CPR, but there was no response. Paramedics arrived at 8:43 p.m. They pronounced both deceased at 8:47 p.m. The deputy later said in a report that the scene was quiet except for the sound of generators and rain. He called dispatch. Dispatch notified the coroner. The coroner arrived at 9:10 p.m. He conducted a preliminary examination. The cause of death was determined to be multiple blunt force injuries. No autopsy was performed because the cause was obvious and the family did not request one. The bodies were transported to a funeral home in Paragould. The funeral home was still operating under COVID-19 restrictions. Only 2 staff members were allowed to prepare the bodies. The process took longer than usual. The funeral home director said that the pandemic had changed everything. The next morning, April 13th, the National Weather Service conducted a damage survey. They used a combination of ground inspections and aerial photography from a drone. The survey team included meteorologists from Memphis and a structural engineer from the Arkansas Department of Emergency Management. They mapped the damage path. They interviewed witnesses. They classified the tornado as EF2. They noted that the worst damage was concentrated in the mobile home park. They also noted that the park had no community safe room. They recommended that the county apply for a FEMA hazard mitigation grant to fund a safe room. That application was submitted in June 2010. It was approved in November 2010. The grant provided $250,000. The county was required to contribute $50,000 in matching funds. The county used money from its general fund. The safe room was built at the recreation center as previously mentioned, but it was not built in the mobile home park. The park owner was unwilling to provide land. The county did not have the legal authority to force him. This is a pattern that repeats across the United States. Mobile home parks are often owned by individuals or companies with limited liability. They are not required to provide shelter. Residents are tenants, not owners. They have no control over the physical infrastructure. The only solution is for the county or state to step in, but that requires funding, political will, and time. In Paragould, the funding came, but the will to place the safe room in the park did not. The residents remain at risk. In the months after the tornado, the city of Paragould held a community meeting. It was held virtually due to the pandemic. About 40 residents attended. The emergency manager presented the findings of the National Weather Service report. He explained the warning timeline. He discussed the limitations of the siren system. He urged residents to purchase weather radios. He offered to help install them. The county provided 20 free radios to low-income households. The city also established a text alert system through Smart 9 Residents could sign up for free. The system sends location-specific warnings. By the end of 2020, about 1,200 residents had signed up. That is about 4% of the population. The question of why more people do not sign up is not unique to Paragould. Nationwide, opt-in alert systems have low participation rates. A 2019 study found that only 12% of households in high-risk areas were registered for such alerts. The reasons include lack of awareness, distrust of government, language barriers, and digital divide. In Paragould, many elderly residents do not use smartphones. They rely on landlines that do not receive text alerts. The wireless emergency alert system bypasses this problem because it does not require registration. Any cell phone connected to a tower in the warning area receives the alert, but not all phones are WEA compatible. Older phones may not have the capability. James and Mary had a flip phone from 2016 that was not WEA compatible. The National Weather Service report recommended that telecommunications providers offer free basic WEA-compatible phones to low-income households. That recommendation has not been implemented. The FCC studied the idea in 2021 but concluded that it would be too costly and that voluntary programs by carriers were sufficient. The carriers have not adopted such programs. The deeper issue is that tornado safety is treated as an individual responsibility. The message is always, have a plan, get a weather radio, take shelter. But that message ignores structural inequalities. Assumes that everyone has the resources to buy a radio, to own a smartphone, to live in a house with a basement. In reality, many people do not. They live in mobile homes. They cannot afford a safe room. They do not have a car to drive to a shelter. They are elderly and frail. The burden falls on them. When they die, the system blames them for not taking action. The Paragould tornado challenges that narrative. James and Mary were not negligent. They were vulnerable. The system failed to protect them. On the evening of August 27, 2021, another tornado struck Arkansas. It was an EF2 that hit the town of Pine Bluff. A mobile home park was destroyed. 3 people were killed. All 3 were elderly. All 3 were in mobile homes. The National Weather Service report again cited the lack of a safe room. The county again applied for a grant. The grant was again approved. The safe room was again built away from the mobile home park. The cycle continues. In March 2023, a study by the University of Arkansas analyzed tornado fatalities in the state from 2000 to 2012. It found that 73% of fatalities occurred in mobile homes. It found that the average age of victims was 66. It found that 85% of victims lived in counties with no community safe rooms within 5 miles of their homes. It found that the lead time for warnings had increased over the decade from an average of 10 minutes to 15 minutes. But lead time does not help if there is no place to go. The study concluded that the most effective intervention is to build safe rooms in high-risk areas. It estimated that a network of 50 safe rooms across the state would cost about $25 million. That is less than the cost of a single mile of interstate highway. The state has not allocated the funding. The Paragould tornado is a small tragedy in a long series of preventable deaths. It is not the deadliest tornado in Arkansas history. That title belongs to the 1925 tri-state tornado, which killed 695 people across 3 states. But it is representative of a modern failure. The science is good. The warnings are timely. The technology is advanced, but the social infrastructure is weak. People die not because the storm was unpredictable, but because the solutions are not applied. The question that remains is not how to detect a tornado. That problem is largely solved. The question is how to protect the most vulnerable. That is a question for policymakers, for emergency managers, for city planners, and for voters. The answer is known. The cost is manageable. The will is lacking. At 8:23 p.m. on April 12, 2020, James and Mary were in their home. They were watching a movie. They had no idea a tornado was approaching. The warning was issued. The siren sounded. The alert was broadcast. None of it reached them. They died in their living room. That is the reality of the Paragould tornado. That is the reality of hundreds of other tornado deaths across the United States. Until the gap between warning and shelter is closed, that reality will continue. The legacy of this event is not a dramatic rescue or a heroic response. It is a quiet lesson about the limits of technology when applied to an unequal society. The weather radio in a drawer does not help if the person cannot hear it. The The siren on the pole does not help if it is too far away. The safe room in the recreation center does not help if it is not in the park. The warning on the smartphone does not help if the phone is not compatible. Each failure is small. Together, they are deadly. The Paragould tornado of April 12, 2020 was an EFTWO. It lasted 6 minutes. It traveled 6 miles. It killed 2 people. It injured none. It destroyed 3 mobile homes. It damaged 40 more. The cost was $2 million. The human cost is incalculable. The lessons are clear. The question is whether they will be applied. That question remains unanswered.